Buddhist scriptures, a statue of the Buddha, and other ritual objects. This foreign faith arrived alongside advanced technologies, Chinese writing, and continental political ideas. The acceptance of Buddhism sparked internal conflict among the conservative clans who favored maintaining indigenous Shinto practices, and those who saw advantages in adopting elements of continental civilization. After initial resistance, Buddhism gained imperial support, began to transform Japanese culture. Prince Shotoku, who served as regent from 594 to 622, became the great champion of Buddhist learning and Chinese-style governance. He authorized the construction of Japan's first great Buddhist temples, sent diplomatic missions and students to China, and issued Japan's earliest formal legal code, the 17-article Constitution. This document emphasized Confucian principles of harmony, respect for authority, and ethical government service. Though less a constitution in the modern sense than a set of moral precepts for officials, it represented an important step toward a more centralized state administration. The most dramatic transformation of the early Japanese state came with the Taika Reform of 645, launched following a court coup. Victorious faction implemented a series of sweeping changes modeled after the Chinese Tang dynasty system. These reforms introduced a centralized bureaucracy, a complex legal code, and a land redistribution system. The new order theoretically abolished private land ownership, declared all land the property of the emperor, and established a system where agricultural fields would be reallocated every 6 years based on household size. A comprehensive administrative system divided the country into provinces, districts, and villages, each with appointed officials responsible for tax collection, conscription, and maintaining order. The reforms also established the Rasurio system, a detailed legal code covering both criminal matters and administrative procedures. This system created ranks and offices during the 8th century. Its verses composed by emperors, court nobles, and even frontier guards capture the emotional and spiritual life of early Japan. These poems reveal a profound sensitivity to nature, the changing seasons and human emotions, aesthetic sensibilities that would later become central to samurai culture. This era also saw important developments in architecture, sculpture, painting, and calligraphy as Japanese artisans mastered continental techniques, gradually developing distinctive styles. Music and dance for court rituals evolved into refined performing arts. Literary Chinese became the standard written language for government documents and scholarly works. Though a modified system using Chinese characters phonetically to write Japanese was also emerging. The political transformation of early Japan laid crucial groundwork for later feudal institutions. The Rasurio system established ranks, offices, and ceremonial roles that would influence Japanese political culture for centuries. The practice of appointing provincial governors and local officials prefigured the later system of daimyo lords and their samurai retainers. Most importantly, this period established enduring patterns of centralized authority, coexisting with considerable regional autonomy, a tension that would characterize Japanese feudalism throughout its history. While true samurai had not yet emerged during this formative period, professional warriors were beginning to gain importance, especially along frontier regions where conflicts with indigenous peoples required military expertise. These early warriors served primarily as guards and police forces rather than as a distinct social class. Their growing role in maintaining order and protecting territorial boundaries foreshadowed the later rise of the samurai as Japan's dominant military and political elite. The imperial court sought greater independence from Buddhist institutional power that had grown influential during the Nara period. In 794, Emperor Kanmu moved the capital to a new city called Heian, modern-day Kyoto, and engaged in political matters through their male relatives. Most significantly, women produced much of the greatest literature of the age, writing in the vernacular Japanese language rather than the formal Chinese used for official documents and male scholarly writing. This literary flowering included poetry collections, personal diaries, perhaps most famously, Murasaki Shikibu's The Tale of Genji, often considered the world's first novel and a masterpiece of psychological insight. The aesthetic sensibilities developed during the Heian period would profoundly influence all subsequent Japanese culture, including the later samurai class. Court nobles cultivated a heightened appreciation for the subtle, the transient, the suggestive. The concept of mano no aware, a poignant awareness of the impermanence of all things, permeated artistic expression. The changing seasons, falling cherry blossoms, autumn leaves, and other natural phenomena became potent symbols of the beautiful yet fleeting nature of life itself. This aesthetic sensibility found expression in poetry, painting, garden design, and even the arrangement of incense or the folding of garments. While the court aristocracy developed their refined aesthetic culture, significant changes were occurring in the provinces that would ultimately transform Japanese society. The Ritsuryo system of public land and tax collection gradually broke down as nobles, temples, and shrines accumulated tax-exempt estates called shuin. These private properties, often managed by local notable families, increasingly escaped central government control. Absentee aristocratic proprietors in the capital relied on local managers to maintain order and collect revenues, creating opportunities for provincial elites to build their own power bases. The imperial court focused on ceremonial functions and cultural refinement, gradually lost effective control over the countryside. Provincial governorships, once rotated among court nobles, became increasingly hereditary and autonomous. Tax revenue flowing to the central government diminished, while regional power, symbolically central to samurai identity, was initially a secondary weapon used when arrows were exhausted or in close quarters. Tales of warrior heroism during the Genpei War helped establish the ideal of samurai conduct. Minamoto no Yoshitsune became the archetype of the brilliant, tragic hero, a superb warrior betrayed by political circumstances. The loyal Benkei, a giant warrior monk who followed Yoshitsune to death, exemplified the virtue of absolute loyalty. Even defeated enemies like Tara no Tamamori, who tied himself to an anchor before plunging into the sea at Dano-Yura, demonstrated the warrior's preference for death over surrender that would become a samurai ideal. Victory in the Genpei War allowed Minamoto no Yoritomo to consolidate power in an unprecedented way. Rather than following the traditional pattern of placing a puppet emperor on the throne while controlling affairs from behind the scenes, Yoritomo established a separate governmental structure based in Kamakura, far from the imperial court in Kyoto. In 1292, he received from the emperor the title of Seitai Shogun or Shogun, great general who subdues the barbarians, which had previously been a temporary military commission but now became the basis for a hereditary military government. Yoritomo's government, called the Bakufu or tent government, established the pattern for feudal rule that would endure through various forms until 1868. The shogun ruled as the emperor's military deputy, but exercised actual political power. Yoritomo placed his trusted retainers in key provincial positions as constables and stewards, creating a network of samurai administrators loyal to him personally, rather than to the imperial court. This dual structure of authority, imperial court and shogunate government, would characterize Japanese politics for the next 7 centuries. The basis of this new feudal order was the personal bond between lord and vassal. Warriors swore loyalty to Yoritomo and received in return official confirmation of their land rights and administrative authority. This relationship, worldly glory, like the once mighty Taira clan, inevitably fades away. Yoritomo died in 1199 after a fall from his horse, and his direct line ended when his sons were assassinated, allowing power to pass to the Hojo clan, relatives by marriage who would rule as regents for figurehead shoguns. Yet the system Yoritomo created would endure, establishing the institutional framework and cultural foundations of feudal Japan that would continue to evolve through centuries of samurai rule. With the establishment of the Kamakura Shogunate, Japan entered a new historical phase defined by samurai governance. The Bakufu, originally conceived as Yoritomo's personal headquarters, evolved into a complex governmental institution with administrative bureaus, judicial courts, and deliberative councils. The heart of this system was the samurai dikoro, or board of retainers, which managed relations with vassals, recorded land holdings, and settled disputes among warriors. This organization exemplified the practical administrative focus of samurai rule, contrast to the ritual-centered governance of the imperial court. Following Yoritomo's death in 1199, actual power passed to the Hojo clan. Yoritomo's young sons, Yori Iie and Sanetomo, successively held the title of shogun, but both died under suspicious circumstances. Yori possibly assassinated by Hojo agents and Sanetomo murdered by his own nephew. The Surigaka Hachiman Shrine in Kamakura. After Sanetomo's death in 1219, the Hojo family instituted a regency system, installing imperial princes or members of the Fujiwara family as titular shoguns while wielding real authority themselves through the position of shurkan or regent. This complex structure of delegated authority, the emperor delegating to the shogun, was in turn controlled by the Hojo regent, reflected a distinctively Japanese approach to political legitimacy. Direct power was veiled behind layers of ceremonial authority, creating a separation between symbolic supervision of samurai officials. The village served as the basic unit of rural administration, collectively responsible for tax payments, maintaining order, and implementing shogunal directives. Village headmen, usually wealthy farmers, mediated between samurai authorities the farming population. The annual rice tax, typically collecting between 40 to 60% of the harvest, flowed from villages to daimyo treasuries and ultimately supported the elaborate samurai governmental structure and lifestyle. Agricultural production increased significantly during the early Edo period through land reclamation, irrigation improvements, new farming tools, fertilization techniques, more intensive cultivation methods. Double cropping became more common, and commercial crops such as cotton, indigo, sugar, and tobacco supplemented rice cultivation. This agricultural surplus supported population growth, urbanization, and the expansion of handicraft industries and trade networks, gradually transforming Japan's feudal economy. Despite official policies aimed at preserving traditional social and economic patterns, the intellectual foundation of Tokugawa rule rested primarily on Neo-Confucianism, particularly the Zhu Shi school from China that emphasized social hierarchy, proper relationships, and moral cultivation. This philosophy provided ethical justification for samurai rule and the rigid social order, teaching that social harmony depended on each person fulfilling their proper role with sincerity and dedication. Confucian academies trained samurai administrators in the classics, history, and ethical principles needed for governance. The Tokugawa Shogunate established the Shoeikyo in Edo as the official academy for bakufu retainers, while daimyo domains created their own schools for local samurai education. Buddhist institutions, formerly independent political and military powers, were brought under strict governmental control. The Tokugawa implemented the Danka system, requiring every household to register with a Buddhist temple or government office. Work might include document preparation, tax assessment, dispute resolution, or inspection of public works. Meals were based on rice with side dishes of vegetables, fish, and occasionally meat. Evenings involved administrative paperwork, self-improvement through reading historical or philosophical texts, martial arts practice, or cultural pursuits such as poetry composition, calligraphy, or musical performance. Formal etiquette governed samurai social interactions with elaborate protocols determining proper greetings, seating arrangements, gift exchanges, and conversational topics based on relative status. The proper way to bow, sit, enter a room, or address superiors was instilled through rigorous training from childhood. This emphasis on correct form reflected the Confucian belief that proper external behavior cultivated internal virtue and the practical need to maintain clear status distinctions in a hierarchical society. Even casual encounters followed prescribed patterns that signaled mutual recognition of social position. Marriage for samurai was primarily a political and economic alliance between families, rather than a relationship based on personal attraction. Marriages were arranged by family heads or domain authorities, often to strengthen political bonds or consolidate resources. The bride brought a dowry of household goods, clothing, and sometimes cash, while the groom's family provided living arrangements. The wife's primary duties included managing the household, supervising servants, educating young children, maintaining family accounts, and producing heirs. Despite these practical foundations, many samurai marriages developed into partnerships of genuine emotional depth over time. The samurai household operated as a multi-generational unit, continuing through time rather than as a nuclear family. Family headship passed from father to eldest son, with younger sons either establishing branch families or remaining as dependents. The household included not only blood relatives but also in currency debasement, forced loans from wealthy merchants, and increased peasant taxation. This economic precarity intensified status anxiety among samurai who struggled to maintain appearances appropriate to their rank. The growing gap between feudal ideology and socio-economic reality generated various responses from the Tokugawa regime. The shogunate periodically attempted to reverse commercialization through sumptuary laws limiting merchant luxury, currency reforms to stabilize rice values, and moral exhortations promoting frugality and traditional values. These reform efforts, most notably those led by shogunate advisors Matsudaira Sadanobu in the 1790s and Mizuno Tadakuni in the 1840s, achieved temporary effects but could not permanently reverse the underlying economic transformation. Each attempted return to feudal fundamentals was followed by renewed commercial growth once reform momentum faded. Rural Japan also experienced significant changes during this period. Agricultural innovations, including new seed varieties, fertilization techniques, irrigation improvements, and double cropping increased productivity substantially. Commercial agriculture spread. Farmers shifted from subsistence production to specialized crops with higher market value, including cotton, indigo, sugar, tobacco, and rapeseed. Villages became increasingly differentiated internally between wealthy farming families with substantial land holdings and marginal cultivators who supplemented agricultural income with handicraft production, wage labor, seasonal migration to cities. These rural transformations created new patterns of inequality and economic interdependence beyond traditional feudal relationships. Proto-industrial production developed in both rural and urban areas, particularly in textiles, sake brewing, paper-making, and ceramic production. Putting-out systems emerged where merchant coordinators distributed raw materials to rural households for processing before collecting finished or semi-finished goods for distribution. Urban workshops organized production along as shogun, hoping to maintain a significant political role within a new imperial government. However, radical elements from Satsuma and Choshu seized the imperial palace in Kyoto on January 3, 1868, and proclaimed the restoration of direct imperial rule. When Yoshinobu mobilized troops to regain control, the brief Boshin War erupted. Despite superior numbers, Bakufu forces lost the decisive Battle of Toba-Fushimi, with many Tokugawa allies defecting or remaining neutral. Further resistance in Edo was avoided through negotiations by Katsukaishu, though fighting continued in northern Japan until mid-1869. The surrender of the last Tokugawa holdouts at Hakodate marked the definitive end of feudal military government in Japan. The Meiji Restoration of 1868, named for the era name of the young Emperor Mutsuhito, represented both culmination transformation of samurai-led political change. The Restoration government initially included representatives from court nobility and various domains, but power increasingly concentrated among leaders from the four key anti-Tokugawa domains, particularly Satsuma and Choshu. These samurai reformers, including figures like Seigo Takamori, Kido Takayoshi, Ito Hirobumi, and Yamagata Aratamo, recognized that preserving Japanese independence required fundamental restructuring of political, military, and economic systems along Western lines. The dismantling of feudal institutions proceeded with remarkable speed. In 1869, the daimyo formally returned their domains to imperial authority, receiving appointments as governors of their former territories. By 1871, these domains were abolished entirely and replaced with prefectures administered by the central government. The elaborate status hierarchy of Tokugawa society was officially abandoned in 1871, with former samurai, peasants, artisans, and merchants unified as imperial subjects with formal legal equality. The commoner